Good evening, everybody. I'm going to walk you through the requirements of this particular project and how we regulate water withdrawals within the Eastern Virginia groundwater management area. For your information, the Eastern Virginia groundwater management area is basically all of the land except the eastern shore that is east of Interstate 95. That land area overlays a very distinct and separate aquifer system that's separate from the aquifers in the rest of the state, okay? So I will get started then. So within that Eastern Virginia groundwater management area, basically any withdrawal of 300,000 gallons in a single month or more requires authorization by DEQ. Okay, so anybody that wants to withdraw that much water has to come to DEQ, and we have to review it for a permit. As a part of that review, the regulations allow us to use two different kinds of authorizations to withdraw water from the coastal plain. The most common authorization is through a standard groundwater withdrawal permit. These permits are issued for a term of 15 years, and it's expected up front that these withdrawals will be long-term withdrawals that will be renewed by a subsequent permit every 15 years. For groundwater withdrawal permits, these renewals require a new application, a new technical evaluation, and what a technical evaluation is that's how we determine what the impact of that withdrawal will be on the aquifer, as well as what the impact of that withdrawal will be on other users, okay? So after we do that, in addition to those requirements for renewals, there's a public comment process and potentially a public hearing process and a hearing before the board. Another way to authorize a groundwater withdrawal is through the use of a special exception, and that is the case for this particular permit. A special exception can be used for a short-term withdrawal that is for a period of time that will be less than 15 years. In this particular case, we are proposing a draft special exception for only a 7-year period of time. All other aspects of the application process, the submittal of different information that we review, the technical evaluation, the public process, are the same for a special exception as it is for a regular groundwater withdrawal permit. As I mentioned, for this groundwater withdrawal, DEQ is using that one-time special exception. So this, we've been studying this aquifer in conjunction with our partners at USGS for over the last 70 years. We have a very long-term relationship in developing our understanding of how this aquifer is structured, how water withdrawals affect this aquifer, and how withdrawals and water use of this aquifer affect the aquifer and people who already use the system. This graphic shows water ages from water samples that were taken from wells in the Potomac aquifer at locations where these years are indicated. So I'm going to use the pointer here for a second. So we had some wells that were along the fall line, which is just east of 95, which Valina would be an area that would be in that general vicinity. The groundwater in this area is in the neighborhood of 10,000 to 19,000 years old, okay? So it's very, very old water. You get a little bit farther down the York-James Peninsula, you get to New Kent, James City County. You know, you're talking about 35,000-year-old water. And then the crater is a separate issue on itself. And you get further north and further east, you start getting into water that is 1 million years old or more. So why is that important? It's important because based on this data, USGS says that we're able to estimate the rate of flow in terms of how the aquifer moves. The aquifer moves generally from west to east, and it supplies water into the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic Ocean through the bottom of those water bodies. When you look at these rates, the youngest water's here, the oldest water's here, and our best estimate of that velocity is 1 to 4 feet per year. Okay, so water moves that way at that rate of speed. So we can actually convert that to a rate of travel, and that becomes important in the next slide I'll show you. Come on. Well, my cursor wouldn't work. There we go. Okay, so here we are. So we can measure the distance from this facility that's proposed here and the border with Henrico County, and water that's located right here at the border will move at that rate of 1 to 4 feet per year based on pumping that occurs in this location. Okay, so we're talking about 4,000 to 15,000 years for water withdrawals that's occurring at the scale proposed here to move any of the water that's located at the border with Henrico County at this point in time. So the only place that this rate of movement is faster in response to the pumping from this particular project's water withdrawal is within these yellow circles. Okay? So let's just talk about some of the basics with this project. Chickahominy Power Plant. It's a 1,600 megawatt electric generating facility. It's located on a parcel off of Chambers Road near State Route 106. For water supply for the facility, it proposes 2 water supply production wells. The non-potable uses of groundwater by the facility will be for constructing the facility, for facility startup, and for their ongoing operations, which would be primarily air cooling of the turbines for that plant. In this case, a special exception term of 7 years, if issued, would apply. And again, as I mentioned earlier, these special exceptions cannot be extended in time or renewed. So technical evaluations, the objective here is to evaluate, as I said, the impact on existing users, which is the area of impact evaluation that we do, and to determine whether the proposed withdrawal meets what we call our 80% drawdown criteria. And what that is our sustainability measurement for whether or not this withdrawal is still sustainable over the long term for this facility. The final thing that we looked at is to evaluate whether or not the change in pressure caused by this withdrawal has the potential to create saltwater intrusion. At this location within the aquifer system, and the very deep part of the system, sometimes there is salt water, and that can potentially be pulled up by a withdrawal. So we evaluate whether or not that'll happen in each permit application before us. For this facility, the maximum proposed withdrawal limits are 30 million gallons a year, which amounts to 3.5 million gallons per month, or on average about 82,000 gallons per day. Now, to kind of put that in context for you, That volume is equivalent to approximately a 300-home subdivision, an irrigated 18-hole golf course, or a 100-acre crop field that's irrigated. Okay, so those are fairly small-scale uses, and this is a small-scale use because it's air-cooled. In our evaluation, we evaluate this using a number of different tools that we have at our disposal. We have a three-dimensional regional groundwater flow model that was developed by the USGS. This is a third-generation model that we've been using in this program, and each new generation of this model is an additional improvement in our understanding. So what we have right now is the latest and greatest. Because this withdrawal is so small, the regional model has some challenges evaluating it properly. So when that happens, we look at a two-dimensional simulation using an analytical model. And in this case, we used both to evaluate the potential impacts for this facility. And finally, when we evaluated this particular application, we evaluated based on that maximum withdrawal as if they pumped that amount every day over a 50-year period. When we did the first evaluation, when we decided that it wasn't subject to a groundwater permit and should be a special exception, we evaluated it for the 7 years that that special exception would be in place. So that's the maximum withdrawal every day for 7 years that we evaluated. So this gives you a little bit of a better visual view of the area of impact evaluation that we do. What we start with is the water level here, the static water level in the model, which is based on data from our current monitoring network. And then we run a simulation at those maximum numbers that we talked about. And what that does is it tells us how far the aquifer will, the deepest point of the water level in the aquifer will be post-withdrawal. And it determines what our area of impact will be, which is this yellow cone of depression. You'll see some circles on the maps around the room as well as in the next slide, which represent this area here shown in black, which is from the water level to 1 foot change in depth caused by the pumping. And that reflects this in a plan view when you see those circles. So when we do this evaluation and we evaluate other wells that are within this circle, depending on how those wells that exist that are within that circle are constructed, they may be eligible for what we call a mitigation plan. Every groundwater withdrawal permit or special exception contains a mitigation plan. And basically what a mitigation plan does is if you're in this particular case here, you have the opportunity to, it's assuming that the new well will be responsible for the impact that you might have in the future at some point. So let me just kind of go through these one by one. If you're in this situation where you're an existing well, you're constructed in the same aquifer that the proposed well is withdrawing from, and you're within the area of impact shown here, you would be subject to the withdrawer here, making you whole for any impacts that you might have. If you're in situation B, where you have a well, you're within the area of impact, but it's screened in a different aquifer. So when I say screened, that means you're withdrawing the water from that aquifer. You're not subject to mitigation. And then in this case, if you're outside the area of impact and you're screened in the same aquifer, you also are not subject to the mitigation plan because the area of impact does not impact the water level in your well. Okay? So that's how we go through that evaluation. So here we conducted both model evaluations for the facility at Chickahominy Power at the site shown, and the area of impact that I showed in the previous slide, that was that yellow area, is this yellow area. And as you can see, the area of impact from those production wells only extends out radially about 540 feet, so 1,080 feet diameter. And in this case, it doesn't extend off property that they own. In this case, it extends very slightly over property that they own. So the area of impact here does not impact anybody in Henrico County and will never impact anybody in Henrico County. It may impact this facility here, but this facility is owned by the gas company that would be supplying gas to the turbine plant, and they do not have any wells on site. So what are the next steps? The next steps are the final draft special exceptions. If you would like to review it, it is available on our website. We also at each table have a copy of that draft document. That draft document is what public comments are being made on right now. You can obtain that document at that website address. As I mentioned, we have a public comment period on this facility that's open currently. It opened on December 26th of 2019, and it will remain open until February 14th of 2020. That's a 50-day public comment period. We did advertise this public comment period in the Richmond Times-Dispatch and the New Kent Charles City Chronicle. And we did post the fact that that was going on our DEQ website, on Facebook, and on the Nextdoor app. We do have, as Jeff mentioned at the beginning, a formal public hearing that will be conducted by a member of the State Water Control Board. And that meeting will be held at 6:30 p.m. Next week, on January 28th, 2020, at Charles City County High School. And the address is listed here if you'd like to get directions to it. So the next steps in the process are that public comments will be submitted through that period. When the public comment period closes, we will compile all those public comments, we will review them, and we will develop staff responses to all of them. That public comment process or summary sheet with the staff responses and the name of the individuals who commented will become a part of the documents that are then forwarded to the State Water Control Board with their board packet when they make their decision. So the State Water Control Board will be meeting. I don't have a final date. It's likely to be sometime mid-spring to late spring. So somewhere around the late March, April timeframe. The comments provided during the public comment period, as I said, will reserve an opportunity for you to address the State Water Control Board. Next week, you'll have the opportunity to either do that orally or in writing. Either way that you do it reserves your spot. At the Water Control Board meeting, we will present the draft special exception, and there will be a staff presentation, and there will also be an opportunity for those people who've reserved their opportunity to comment by commenting during the comment period to address the board. You can see when that meeting of the State Water Control Board is scheduled when it gets posted on this town hall web link. Okay. And that is all that I have. So Jeff, how are...
As a way to try to get the best of both worlds is we'll have an opportunity now to, in a group setting, to ask questions of our staff on the presentation you heard or on the specific action that's before the agency. And then at approximately after 7:30 or so, we'll have an opportunity then to have you all mingle at the tables because we put a lot of time into getting information to hand out to you. So some people who also may not be comfortable asking a question in a big group have an opportunity. We don't want to lose that. So I think we can do this kind of both ways and still try to stay transparent and be able to ask questions. I would ask that everyone be respectful of each other and of the agency and those in the room. Ask a question that's on topic. I would ask that no one else chime in or start clapping or start making other disruptive comments while we're answering questions. And we'll start this right now this way. So first hand I saw was right here.
Thank you. Maybe I'm missing something. Is there any reason why you discussed only the 1,600 megawatt plant and not the other one?
The other one, the permit for the surface water withdrawal from the James River was issued over a year ago.
I see.
Okay.
Could Mr. Grist explain to everyone, like he explained to me, about the 7 years that it's not renewable and that and you can chime in any time, that they have to reapply, that they can get a new application. At the end of the 7 years, when this expires, a new application can be submitted to continue the well withdrawal.
Yeah, special exceptions, as I said, are one-time actions by the State Water Control Board or DEQ, acting on their behalf. We have issued approximately 6 of those in the past. They were not renewed, and they were not applications that came forth after they expired for a groundwater withdrawal permit. Now, the way in which the statute and the regulations are structured, there is nothing that would prohibit anybody from applying for a groundwater withdrawal permit. However, based on the past precedent of the board, as well as the staff evaluation that went into deciding that this was subject to a special exception rather than a groundwater withdrawal permit, we believe that those facts would still stand if they came and asked for a groundwater withdrawal permit after that special exception expired.
So if somebody's going to come in and cut the wells off, because Mr. Grist said y'all don't have the authority to do that, and that they would have the opportunity to apply for a new one if they do not have another water source, which is supposed to come from New Kent.
Yeah, they have a contract with New Kent.
And if that falls through, that's my question. I want to know what's going to happen at the end of the 7 years, because nobody's going to come out there and cut those wells off.
Yeah, it's an enforcement action. I mean, if the permit or the special exception expires, at that point in time, that facility gets inspected. The special exception says that those wells will be abandoned. So in order to abandon those wells, they have to fill them with concrete. So we will have an inspector that will go and will follow up with that. If they don't carry that out, then it becomes subject to our enforcement process, which is a graduated enforcement process that would start with orders. It has the potential for fines and the potential for referral to the Attorney General, depending on how those graduate through that process.
But they do have the opportunity to apply for a new special exception.
Yes, that's not prohibited by the statute or the regulation.
And we have to go through this whole process again. In the meantime, they'd still be withdrawing water.
No, I don't know that that's the case. You know, if they applied, we would have the option to deny that application.
Yes.
But the water supply is so abundant that at least here in Henrico County, we don't have to worry about that withdrawal to the aquifer. Why doesn't the applicant just continuously use the well? Why is it set at 7 years as opposed to it just being one of the regular permits that could be easily renewed?
DEQ wouldn't characterize the groundwater in the coastal plain aquifer system necessarily as abundant. There are areas where the volume is limited, and in fact, we've just completed a 7-year process where some permittees were required to reduce their amount to ensure the long-term sustainability of the system. Given the way that the aquifer works in the coastal plain, location is very important as to whether or not any current available supply exists. In this particular location, there is supply for a short-term withdrawal before they can hook up to another existing user that already has an allocation.
So in other words, if they were to go beyond 7 years, then that starts to fail the ability for that aquifer to be able to support that volume of water.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Next question.
So the homes that are located in this Chickahominy gas power plant, they don't have any reason to believe that you could drain their wells? Are they safe?
So you're saying that
The homes?
the homes in Charles City County around the facility, will they be impacted and lose their ability to draw water because of this project?
Yes.
I think the answer is no.
Yeah. The answer is no, because the only area that would be impacted by the withdrawal are those yellow circles you see on the map. On the maps over there, the red circles, and there are no residential areas within that.
Yes, they are.
Hello, then why was there just a map up there that showed us that you will be impacted here, maybe not here, and maybe here, and yes, you'll be impacted there?
That was a hypothetical description
This is
to
a
show.
hypothetical question then, let's have an answer for it.
There are no wells within the area of impact.
The people that's been here in Verina long enough might remember that where 895 construction was granted that they could draw water from an adjacent aquifer, and a lot of Verina residents ended up with dry wells. And DEQ allowed for that to happen, so how do we know that this is not going to happen? I mean, that back then it was an assumption too, and this is all hypothetical and assumptions.
I think the question I'm hearing is that we issued a permit to VDOT to construct and withdraw water that ended up having an impact after we would have modeled and said it didn't. In theory, that's the way I'm not going to.
Yeah, nor am I. I'm not familiar with what you were talking about. That would have been a first generation model. You know, one of the reasons why we moved to a second and a third generation model was because that earlier model did not have the level of resolution that this one has. So at that point in time, there probably was a limited ability to identify what individual wells might be impacted by that withdrawal.
Yes. How much does this cost and what's the benefit for the county? How much does it cost to build this plant? Now, what's the benefit for us as taxpayers for
That's
this plant?
That is not within the purview. First, I don't know, we don't know the answer to the first question about what it costs to build the plant. And whatever the benefits are, they would have gone through a local approval that the site was, when they first were trying to get the site located, they had to work with Charles City County to get approval to construct that plant. And so whatever benefit the county saw, you would have to talk to them, but that's not within the purview of DEQ.
So we need to go down representative to find what the benefit of this power plant. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, we cannot answer what the benefit to any resident is, either in Charles City County or Henrico County. It's just, we don't have that information
You're state agency though, right?
Yes,
So you represent us.
that's correct.
But I don't get it that way. I don't see it like you represent the company.
No, we're representing the.
I know, I worked all my life. I know. I used to be able to say.
Water taken out is used to cool the generators or the turbines. What happens to all that water, and what is the impact, since you're talking about you're the water man, what is the impact of all the water that's not used and where it goes?
That water would go to the Roxbury wastewater treatment plant in Charles City County, which is subject to DEQ Virginia discharge permit. And it discharges, I believe, to a tributary that goes to the Chickahominy and ultimately to the James.
Okay, so you're basically taking the water out, you're doing what you gotta do with it, now you're taking contaminated water, or whatever, heated water, water that's, and you're dumping it into the James River or back in the ocean.
I wouldn't characterize it as dumping it. It's going
Okay,
through the
now,
waste.
excuse me,
It's going through a treatment process through the county, and it has to meet all the standards. They have a permit from us to discharge wastewater sewage. It's a sewage treatment plant that can accept this water and make sure that it treats it to the standards that are in their permit.
Okay.
Water is compatible with, they have a sewer use ordinance. They have to, that anybody that's discharging into their facility has to comply with whatever local limits are going into it so that it can adequately treat the water before it goes in its discharge.
So it has.
So it has to be compatible and it has to be able to be treated by the, they can't just discharge something that's going to cause an upset of the wastewater.
My question is, will the actual wastewater treatment plant have to be upgraded monetarily with our Charles City County taxes that I'll be paying there?
Yeah.
I'm not aware
To
that
take
it is.
on this much extra water to be treated and then released safely?
I'm not aware that it is, but again, that would be something you would have to ask Charles City County.
I will.
Anybody who hasn't had a question to ask first, yes.
Actually, I had two questions, if you don't mind. Y'all did a regional water impact model. Is that what I understood from the presentation, not just a area of impact model?
Yeah, what I mentioned was we used both. We have a regional model that models the entire coastal plain aquifer in Virginia, and then we did a two-dimensional evaluation using an analytical model that's a site scale.
If I understood your response on the regional, there was almost negligible impact from the modeling from this water withdrawal?
Yeah, withdrawals of this small scale don't show up very well in the regional model, which is why you use the local scale two-dimensional model.
In the mitigation plan, are you familiar with that? That was part of the package sent out by your...
Not in detail, but my staff might be.
Is this standard language in here if for people who make an application for reimbursement for water loss, that if they determine that somehow the Chickahominy Power people decide that the request for water mitigation to them, that their well went dry or whatever else, that it requires an awful lot of information that I don't think the average homeowner would have, which was talked about at the last informational meeting. It also talks about the fact that if they decide that it's a frivolous request to the power plant, that then the homeowner is on the hook for paying for that. Is that standard language in the mitigation plan?
That is boilerplate language for all mitigation plans.
Can that be changed by y'all or by the board? I'm trying to figure out what to write in my comments to the board. I'm trying to figure out if I can write a comment that says, I find this to be a little onerous on a homeowner whose well has gone dry, who may not be in the immediate impact area, but might be right outside of the impact area according to your drawing.
Yeah.
And then they end up with no well water, don't have the technical information that's required to make the request, then they have to hire somebody to get that information for them. And then if their request is turned down or decided by the Chickahominy power plant to be frivolous, then they could be on the hook for additional money.
I would just correct your statement that it's not the company that makes those decisions, it's the mitigation panel. And so the person who's saying that their impact has their own member on the panel, the company has a member of the panel, and I believe there's
an agreeable member between the two of them.
right, and then there's one that's jointly agreed to. So the reason that they have to provide that information is that that panel needs to have data that demonstrates the things in that conceptual slide that I showed you, to show that they're drawing from the same aquifer, to show how their well's constructed. Otherwise, there would be no impact by that particular withdrawal. So that has to be documented in order to be addressed by the panel.
And would you recommend to a homeowner to have that done now if they were concerned?
You should have it already. You should have gotten it when the well was drilled. The well driller should have it.
So anybody who lives in the Charles City area that's close to this, theoretically, what you're telling me is that when their well was drilled, the information that's in the mitigation plan documentation should be available.
That information should be available.
Okay.
If you want my personal opinion is there are no impacts beyond that circle, and so I wouldn't be concerned.
Okay. Thank you.
Next question.
This impact area was defined using this third generation model. So basically what we're saying is what they operated under with the first and second model, those models really weren't valid, and that's why we've come up with the third one. Well, what ongoing oversight of this third model and this impact area is going to go on, either oversight on monitoring, because who's to say that this third generation is correct? Now, you talked about 895. We can even go back. I don't know which one of these models was in play in 295 when 295 was built, but I can tell you of at least 50 homeowners that lost their wells with the construction of 290. I mean, just the construction of 295.
Well, that predates the program, so there wouldn't have been any evaluation.
Right. So we know we were wrong then. We knew we were wrong about the time of 895. How do we know that we're not wrong with this?
Well, one, I don't know that we were wrong because I don't know that it was a regulated withdrawal, so I don't know the DEQ even reviewed it. Two, the primary difference between the various iterations of the model is the computational power. So as computers got better, they could take the available data and present more accurate results. It's not that the models aren't accurate or aren't valid, they just increase in accuracy because they can compute more data.
That's play with words, but my next question is probably, coming here, I didn't realize that this was just focusing on the water issue. I would imagine that the DEQ also has something to do with air quality. Is that like a separate process and separate permits and?
That is, and it's under a separate statute and law in Virginia. And we've already gone through the process, had public information meetings, public hearings, and that permit to construct this source was issued by the State Water Control Board last year.
Water control?
Air Board, I'm sorry. Stuck on water tonight.
So